it's a complex issue in terms of you know, at what cost you're procuring the coal. Do you have the stability in terms of supply? What are the environmental issues that coal thermal power generation has to really deal with? And given that we're looking at transition, these norms are becoming more stringent year on year, in terms of extraction, in terms of supply, and also in terms of generation.
Stay tune di IESR Bicara Energi.
Hi Sobat Essentials, welcome to 2 and 2, a conversations on energy transition. My name is Martha. I am a social and economic analyst from IESR, Institute for Essential Services Reform in Indonesia. And today I'll serve as your moderator for today's podcast. So today we have an exciting discussion lining up for us. Continuing the previous podcast, we will share the story both from benefits and challenging sides from various countries across the globe. Joining me today, all virtually, for our esteemed guests that will share their knowledge and experience to our conversations on the energy transition and in their context. So first, we have Ms. Swita Kulkarni, a fellow at Prayas Energy Group from India. We also have Ms. Afaf Ali, Associate Industrial Decarbonization at Renewable First from Pakistan. And we also have Mr. Ilham Rizkian Surya, Environmental Policy Analyst at IESR from Indonesia. And we also have Mr. Harwi Bawa, Head of Economics and Development Funding from Development Planning Agency, South Sumatra Province in Indonesia Subnationals. Thank you so much for your time, and it's nice to have everyone's here joining me virtually and for accepting IESR invitations to share your knowledge, your experience on the energy transition agenda in each of your country. So I don't want to waste any more time. I think if it's okay, I can start with the first questions. And I want these questions to be answered by each one of you. So maybe we can start with Mr. Ilham, and then we can continue after that. So how does the energy transitions look like in your country, in Indonesia? Mr. Ilham, please.
Sure, thank you.
Time is yours.
Hi, Shweta and Afa. Okay, so energy transition started to really take off after the COVID pandemic at the end of 2001 and 2002, followed by a series of regulations and events like the JETPs, like the ADB transition mechanisms, and there's the national level presidential regulation on energy transition. But it started to take off, but it's not really quickly happening yet. So the big picture that I'm trying to give you is that it is still full of discourses. It is still full of ideas on how energy transition is supposed to look like. And in Indonesia, there are many actors. I imagine it's the same with in India and in Pakistan. Many actors, many stakeholders are trying to assert their influence in the policy direction, and these actors are using discourses, ideas, and media to try to push how energy transition is supposed to look like, where the idea is going. And regarding the direction, government has a pretty much concrete idea, but it's translated into multiple different government documents, which for if you are new to energy transition and you have to start at these places there is no one single document which says that our energy transition goes here, for example. So yeah, in short, it's still being directed, our energy transition, but we as time goes by, we get a pretty much clear idea on where this transition is going.
But how is the target? Like the commitment, I think, is there here in Indonesia, but the ongoing target and its ongoing progress. What do you think about it? Like, is it really? I mean, also influenced by our presidential elections. And I think it's the whole things here in Indonesia is very politically sensitive, I guess. So what is your take on today's progress on energy transition in Indonesia?
Yeah, sure. What I meant with direction is, I think we are still going to maintain coal usage through, coal derivatives like gasification and so on. Even the government created their own jargon that coal could be downstream. It's basically creating coal derivatives. So even if we are no longer using coal for our power sector, coal still exists somewhere else in other forms. So they can call it clean coal or something, but yeah, it's basically that the direction is still maintaining fossil fuel as much as possible, without yeah, it's basically still maintaining the use of fossil fuel in the roadmap.
I would also like to know the story in Pakistan, Mrs. Afaf Ali. How do the energy transition look like in Pakistan?
Thanks for asking the question. So, starting from giving an overview of what kind of energy mix we have at this moment in Pakistan, like all the Asian countries, we are currently producing more from thermal energy. Our baseload electricity is coming from that, and then we have very good hydropower resources. We are capitalizing on around 31% of electricity is being generated from that hydro resources. And so a drawback on renewable energy is that we are only capitalizing 4 to 5% of that energy in the current energy mix. So the energy transition, considering the policy landscape, is that we have a very optimistic scenario at this moment, as government published energy transition, sorry, not directly energy transition policy, but it's like alternative energy policy in 2019, in which it targeted that we have to get 30% of renewable energy into the energy mix by 2030. So in that context, they had been doing a lot of work around developing a lot of renewable energy projects, but our dependency on the fossil fuel remains there. It's not going to go anytime sooner as well, because considering that we have very optimistic targets, but still we are lagging behind, because in the recent current portfolio as well, they wanted to add around 10 gigawatt of solar power to the grid, but by 2030, and we haven't been able to secure around even 600 megawatt in the first phase of those auctions as well. So that presents an optimistic picture, but not a very realistic picture.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Afaf Ali. And I heard also in Pakistan's the energy, the electricity market is like distributed. So in that case, is that influence or affecting the realistic target in Pakistan? Because here in Indonesia, we have the like some monopoly type of market where only one state companies regulate and like sell the electricity here. And I don't and I want to know, like, is it the market mechanism and everything really influencing the the enforcement, or like the driving factors of the renewables in Pakistan?
Yeah, so in that case, we do have a very centralized system which is owned by the government. We do have independent power producers as well, but it's all the energy or electricity production is regulated by the government in terms of tariff determinations or long-term power purchase agreements. Considering the overall landscape, but there are like certain provisions around having captive power plants in the industrial segments which are don't come under the centralized regulation, but they have to actually get that generation license from the regulatory authorities. So considering that, the major factor that affects Pakistan's position in energy transition is the socio-political tensions. We do have a lot of political influence on the policies and the regulations as well. And all these departments that regulate the electricity market in Pakistan are upheld by the government as well. So that's where we are also getting a very high subsidies on electricity, but we are also producing a very high cost electricity as compared to the costs of renewables at this moment. So, yeah, making sense of the renewable and energy transition is that is our least cost alternative at this moment as well. And considering the planning around the renewable energy integration into the energy mix, but decentralization should come first, then like integrating more renewables, because at this moment the centralized system is linked with a lot of losses around the country. We are actually losing around 15 to 20% of our electricity generated, and that is like hefty costs that are paid by the public in this context. Yeah,
Okay, thank you
I
so
hope I
much for,
answered the question.
yeah, thank you so much for the elaborations. And then I would also like to know, how does the energy transitions look like in India? Mrs. Sweta, please.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes.
Yes. Uh, Thanks, Martha. Thanks, Ilam, and thanks, Afa. I think you set the context in terms of, the same boats that most of the countries here that we're representing here are sailing in, which is our high dependency and reliance on coal thermal power for generation specifically of electricity. But I think with a country like India, the challenges become manifold. Essentially because we're the fourth largest country in the world in terms of electricity consumption. We have a wide area as a country. The climatic patterns across the country also vary a lot. The geographical patterns across the country are also very diverse. So I think along with this, given that um, we do have several states, there is a lot of diversity in where resources are available and how the resources get allocated. Also create significant challenges in terms of, let's say, livelihood opportunities, jobs, as well as utilizing resources available from one part of the country to really meet energy demands of the rest of the country. And then, of course, also leading to a lot of environmental problems, specifically linked with coal extraction as well as coal power generation. But nonetheless, I think India as a country has also been taking very strong action and also being taking the entire energy transitions very seriously, where our central government and our central authorities have declared that by 2070, India will set to achieve its net zero targets. In order to achieve those targets, we also have a target that has been set that by 2030, 50% of our energy requirement will be met through renewable energy. Um, and we are moving towards that target uh, in a way where we want to achieve almost 500 gigawatts of renewable capacity to be uh, to form a major component of our power generation. So, in order to sort of focus or achieve these targets, I think the things that at the country level we have been all working towards is improving renewable energy capacities, of course, um, developing technologies and solutions to be able to achieve these targets, look at alternative, access to alternative fuel and develop alternative fuel, especially not just for electricity, but also for other end uses like cooking and transport. And at the same time, working towards reducing our dependency on coal thermal power generation. Having said that, I think my area of work and also what Prayas does is more in better understanding the policy and the regulatory spaces, where we see that in order to have an effective transition in the country, when I say effective, it means fair, equitable, and a smooth transition. It is necessary that we need to take into account several factors, including whether we have the capabilities for manufacturing, technology that is required for renewable capacity enhancement, also to look at whether and how many livelihoods and jobs will be affected in the process of this transition. Also looking at whether the policies that are being developed are at the same pace in which we expect that the transitions should be achieved. And at the same time, also looking at innovations that we can bring about in the energy and the power sector to allow for these transitions to happen through smoothly and help us achieve our net zero targets. I think I will stop here. Maybe we can build.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Swita. It's very interesting. So it's kind of similar to stories before from Indonesia and Pakistan, that the commitment is there, but and the progressive actions is also there, but there's some room of improvement here and there, especially the policy and regulatory framework to enable the transitions goes more smooth and then equitable, like Mr. Shrita mentions. And in your perspective, maybe related to what Praya Groups is working on, what is the first step in order to maybe identify the root of the challenge, or like the first step to get closer to the solutions? Is there any things or like any thoughts on my questions? Please, Mrs. Shita.
Yeah. I think there are 2-3 specific challenges, and or I would say 2-3 specific areas, especially for a country like India, where we can focus on to really smoothen this process of transition. One is we have a structure where most of our distribution companies, that is the power supplying companies, are government owned currently. They are very, very tightly regulated. And there have been a lot of inefficiencies in the way they work, in terms of their planning, in terms of their operation. And hence, for over 2-3 decades, all of these companies have always been in losses. And this debt that the distribution companies come with create a huge impact on whether new and innovative ideas in terms of even technology adoption, can it be done by these distribution companies to allow for the transition to happen? And I say this because I think we also share a similar sort of structure with what Afaf was saying, is that the large industries and commercial consumers in India tend to subsidize. So we have a cross subsidy structure where they subsidize the smaller consumers and the agricultural consumers. Given that the renewable energy prices have been dropping significantly, a lot of these industries and large commercials want to now move away from the utilities or the distribution companies and adopt to a more, get power from cheaper sources through the open access or the green open access process that we have in our country right now. What this is leading to is it leaves the utilities which are already under the financial stress with low paying and even highly subsidized consumers like agricultural sector. And so in terms of the average cost of supply to a consumer with these public owned utilities is somewhere around 7 rupees. And the cost, if you procure from distributed or let's say renewables, is somewhere even less than 5. So for large industries and for large commercials, it certainly makes financial viability more efficient if they move away from the distribution companies. And hence, with this structure, it is really necessary how these distribution companies can sort of look at more different approaches in their operation, in their in how they procure power, from where they're procuring power and at what cost, and bringing in flexibility in this entire process of power procurement and power supply as well. So here I see that at least for a country like India, one big area which needs a lot of innovation and a lot of work is essentially in trying to look at different models of distribution of electricity, and looking at them more from the perspective of, probably a network of wires, and the supply can be procured from different sources, looking at them more as, a solution where who can allow for balancing the grid well, given the demand as well as the supply coming from different sources, including intermittent renewables. And I think also coming up with a revenue model which will help them sustain longer and further through this entire process of transition. Martha, just let me know if I'm going overboard at any point. You can just cut me. But probably I will want to highlight two more aspects here, specifically from the Indian context. Is that okay? Can I continue?
Yes, you can continue.
Yeah. So I think the other two aspects which I think, especially in the context of transitions for India, is how we transition away from coal. Given that 80 to 85% of our generation currently is also dependent on coal thermal systems, how do we work towards reducing coal share in the grid, at the same time ensuring that the grid does not become unstable? Given that a country like India, our demand has been increasing at the rate of almost 8 to 9% per year, where do we get the power from, and also ensure at the same time that the consumer requirement in terms of the quality of supply and standards are being met? And then looking at, with coal thermal power, I think these issues will also resonate with Ilham and Afaf, is that it's a complex issue in terms of, at what cost you're procuring the coal. Do you have the stability in terms of supply? What are the environmental issues that coal thermal power generation has to really deal with? And given that we're looking at transition, these norms are becoming more stringent year on year in terms of extraction, in terms of supply, and also in terms of generation. So at the same time, coal has its own set of challenges, but there are also a lot of people and a lot of livelihoods that are dependent on this system. So in a country like India, there are these, a lot of this industry is actually unregulated, and hence there are no very clear numbers, but some studies suggest that there is almost over 1 million livelihoods that are dependent on this entire coal value chain. So how do you provide jobs and opportunities to all of these people who are currently dependent on these systems? And then, especially in India, what we've seen is coal is available to us in the eastern belt in the country. And what the entire value chain of coal has done is it has brought a lot of infrastructure to this area. So once you move away from coal, what happens to the infrastructures in terms of maintenance of roads, in terms of maintenance of water supply, dam systems that have been built? So who will ensure that the people around those areas continue to get these infrastructure and these services? And I think finally, one last thing that I'd like to just bring in here is in India specifically, a lot of our uh, energy, rather, from all sources contributes to almost 10% of our tax revenues. So, and most of these revenues come from fossil-based fuel. So if we have to really move away and transition to cleaner fuels, so what happens to all of the taxes, the cess, the royalty that is being collected, which contributes, like I said, significantly, almost 10% to our entire bucket of expenditure that the government has. So I think these are some 3, 4 broad concerns that I see in the process of transition, especially for India. I think I will stop here.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Swita. So it's whole structural system that we need to shift away from, and so many basically things to consider. And I think your story is very similar to what happened here in Indonesia, because I'm also from Indonesia, so I can only comparing the context of your story to Indonesia. But I also believe that there are many opportunities that can be emerge because of the energy transitions. This podcast is not only talking about the context in the national level, but we are so pleased to hear the story from our guest here from the subnational level, from one of the coal producing region in Indonesia, from South Sumatra. So, without wasting any time, I would like to ask the first questions. Mr. Hari, how does the energy transition look like in Indonesia, especially in South Sumatra?
Okay, thank you. In general, the energy transition context is gradually shifting from fossil fuel to renewable energy source. But however, in our context at a provincial level, we focus on the effort of economic transformation from coal dependent to more sustainable source. We often mention that coal contributes 16% to South Sumatra GDPs. This figure is huge and will continue as our main focus in the energy transition framework. From the government side, we have also accommodated the energy transition in the long-term planning document for South Sumatra province from 2025 to 2045, which is divided into 4 stages and is staged within 5 years of the medium-term development plan, where each stage we plan to reduce the use of fossil fuel by mitigating the sectors and will be affected, such as workers working in the coal sector, changes in the livelihood of residents around the mine and other sectors.
Thank you so much for the elaboration, Mr. Hari. But I would like to know more about subnational commitment or like strategy towards the energy transition, because as you mentioned, South Sumatra incorporating the agenda and commitment in medium-term and long-term planning document. But how does the actions look like in South Sumatra?
So for the action is already start earlier, before the issue is appear in around the world of the emission reduction. We start at 2013. We already have a gas power plant in one of region, and also we have bioenergy use from waste palm oil plant and other like use of rice husk to power plant in one of region, and also we use geothermal power plant. That's the action of in the field, and we support that from our government with support of fund, and also we use regulation to make easy to invest for renewable power plant.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Hari. Up to the next questions. Does the energy transition presents a challenge in South Sumatra? Can you please tell us the story about the challenges or like elaborate on that?
Okay, as a cooperation area, South Sumatra face a lot of challenge that quarrying and mining sector is contribute 27.6% of South Sumatra GDP, and its coal is 60% of our GDP. So this sector is the main contributor, followed by processing industry and forestry and agriculture. In the spirit of just energy transition, we need multi-party support, especially from the central government, so that South Sumatra can gradually shift and build the economic development from a coal-dependent area into a more sustainable economic system. And the challenge from our perspective is profits include, first is policies related to just energy transition in the future can help to create a conducive climate. For example, is for green investment. Secondly, funding or investment, especially from infrastructure and massive development of renewable energy. Currently, South Sumatra has a potential of 20,000 megawatt, but only 4% or around 900 megawatt has been utilized. The third is toward the economic diversification. So Sumatra profits need to explore potential economic source and priority activities that can be developed in the future. So this aim to contribute more value to South Sumatra GDP, which has so far been dominated by mining and quarrying sector. South Sumatra Planning Board currently is collaborate with development partners like IESR and GIZ, and the latest is the University of Indonesia in conducting a study related to economic diversification. And the fourth, the mining sector absorbs at least 70,000 workers, and they will be lose their job when the coal production is declined in South Sumatra. For this reason, reskilling and upskilling effort need to be prepared so that they can continue to work in the renewable energy sector and other productive sector. Maybe that's I can answer for that question.
Okay, thank you. It's very interesting about the elaboration and the story from South Sumatra, because the challenges that have been mentioned by Mr. Haris consist of so many aspects, from regulations, from the companies on the workers aspect sides also, and then also from the economic and investment side. But Mr. Hari, I would also to know more about these challenges. Which one is the most urgent or like important challenge to address from today's in your opinion? Is there like some prioritizing or like some strategic issues that need to be addressed before beginning the economic diversification, for examples, or like in general agenda of the transitions? What do you think, Mr. Hari?
Yeah, I think the first is difficulties to transformation is first is the coal price is now is a high good price. So when we have to compete with the cheap energy source, is very difficult. So to develop renewable energy is need some subsidies from government, some effort to local communities, like to develop the use of renewable resource from their livelihood, like from waste from household and others, and that for the start, as long as the coal price is high, we can compete with that cheap energy source from coal. So that we need like a sample, like Indonesia government like used to change from kerosene to gas, yellow gas. I'm sorry, green gas, like in now, and subsidies gas. They use to reduce the corrosive first, and they go to produce a lot of gas that contribute to all the society at the cheap price. Now that's the strategy that we need to implementing in all Indonesian region, so that we can go to renewable energy source in all Indonesia.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Hari. So from the local government perspective, it is very important to have the policy and regulation regarding the pricing and economic side of the energy source. I would summarize from your answers. But I also would like to know the story in Indonesia, Mr. Ilham. Besides the challenges that Mrs. Swita also already described for us, what do you think is the main challenge in Indonesia, and what is the evidence of benefits that are happening in Indonesia? Because very similar also to Indonesia, we have the problems in the electricity side and also in the coal producing region side. So both the stories from coal producing regions and then like the coal-fired power plant regions is happening in Indonesia. So what is the main challenge and what are the benefits of doing energy transitions in Indonesia? Please, Mr. Ilham.
Yeah, sure. Sure. We we surely can draw a parallel between Indonesia and India, both in the power sector and in the coal producing regions, and it's economic gains from coal given to the national budget. Sure, we can draw a parallel in those dilemmas, but probably in a bit smaller scale. Shweta said that 1 million jobs will be lost. For example, in Indonesia, it's around I think it's quarter of that. It's 250,000 jobs around the coal supply chain. But it's similar, very similar with India, but again in a much smaller scale. I think which sparks the question: is it easier to transition if we are in a it surely gives perspectives on how difficult it is to transition. For example, I couldn't imagine 250 moving 250 jobs, let alone 1 million. So it surely gives us a perspective on this matter. But yeah, on benefits, there are multiple angles in which I can I can give you an answer, but probably for this I will use global cooperation. In I just feel like it's fitting that there is representatives from India, from Pakistan, from Indonesia talking about energy transition. So I'll just say that global cooperation is the real benefits that we can see right now. So I told you earlier that starting from COVID pandemic, Indonesia's energy transition effort started to take off. So it actually started to take off from the awareness sharing that the world is sharing. We have the common agenda, common awareness, and it followed upon with the transfer of technology, with of course monetary transfer, which usually the global north are transferring to the global south, Indonesia and other countries. You can say the JETPs and etc. This monetary transfers create jobs, which this podcast has highly urged. What about those jobs that we lost? And so it's important to talk about how many jobs that we can create based on this global cooperation. So ESR actually tracked on how many finance how much money have been mobilized since the end of 2021 up until the end of 2023, and only from the bilateral agreements there were 15 billion US dollars, which it's not at all enough to transform our power system totally, but it's still enough to create jobs now, not in 2050, not in 2030, but now. So this monetary mobilization started from the global cooperation that we talked about earlier. So this is, I think, the real felt benefits of energy transition now. And just to round up, I think the Ministry of National Planning, Development Planning, as well as IESR, we have our own projections on how many green jobs will be made in 2050, and that will amount up to 2 until 2.5 or even 3 millions. It all depends, but it's all just projections. But it's a very good numbers to start off, and that numbers can be felt now with those global cooperation that trickle down into transfer of technology, transfer of monetary mobilization. Yeah, I think I will stop now. Thank you, Martha.
Thank you so much. It's very interesting elaborations on how the global agenda on energy transition is impacting our country's wealth, and maybe it's opportunity in other economic development also. But Mr. Ilham, maybe you can also share the story, if there any, on how is the local people impacted from maybe like some economic diversification programs in subnational level, or maybe something else that are related to grassroots community, because also I also believe that the benefits is not stopped in the state level, and is that really happening in Indonesia?
Sure. Yeah, well, that monetary mobilization that I spoke about earlier, it showed for sure trickling down into a subnational and even municipal level, but they're not really. I mean, the economic transformation. Let me start again. So the energy transition takeoff that I said earlier, it happened right at the time where the Russian and Ukraine conflict, which creates coal demand boom, which currently still benefits the coal producing country and even Indonesia as a state. So it couldn't happen at any worse time. That's what I'm going to say. So the timing is quite unfortunate, which means that this local these regions, these municipalities, these subnationals are being quite reluctant to transform now, because they are reaping the benefits of the Russian and Ukraine conflicts, because the coal prices, the coal demand is soaring quite high. It has been reduced now, but it's still quite high. So this reluctancy creates delay in the economic transformation planning, because, as you know, economic transformation planning takes a long time to study, to the study itself, it should be started by these regions, but it got delayed from because of this boom of coal demand. So I think they will start soon. As I said, the awareness is there, and the national government is trying to improve this awareness, but for now, I think it's delayed. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so maybe it's the matter of time, and but for sure the as you say the trickling down effect is not stop in a state or national level, but going down also in the municipalities and subnationals. It's very interesting. I also want to know the story from Pakistan, Mrs. Afif. Are there any some success story or like some example on how the energy transition agenda in Pakistan's benefits people in the country, or like maybe how the your organization renewable first maybe also contributing to the driving the enablers on the energy transition in Pakistan. So the benefits and maybe like some driving factors that you can share also for us, please, Mrs. Afif.
Sure, thank you, Martha. Well, in a very personal opinion, I think the future holds energy transition at the heart of our decarbonization efforts as well, as the world wants to achieve net zero, and considering that at COP28 again, we want to triple the renewable energy to achieve or to limit the 1.5 degree of average global mean temperature. So, contemplating the net zero futures, it is quite evident that the power sector will be the first one to actually achieve net zero. In a lot of studies, it has been highlighted that renewable energy technologies like wind and solar are already very mature enough to reach that. So, yeah, that's the context. But coming forward, that right now we are importing most of our fossil fuels, either in the form of oil or natural gas. We are not capitalizing on our indigenous coal resources. We are doing it, but it's on a very smaller scale as compared to the other resources of the thermal energy we are using at this moment. So, considering that, it has already led us to accumulate a huge amount of circular debt. Now, coming forward and considering that this economic devastation could be rebuilt by using our renewable energy potential that we have at this current time. So, as highlighting the renewables first stance, what we did is that government normally prepares a document which is called Integrated Planning Document (IGSEP). It comes on the real yearly basis, and it plans the energy for the next decade as well. And they had the claims of adding 30% of renewable energy by 2030. But we did at Renewables First our independent analysis on software, energy modeling software called Plexos, and we have found out that unnecessary limitations put on the renewable energy has capped the potential, that we can actually add more than what they have already planned. So, in our independent analysis, we got it around 47% in the current existing infrastructure. So, that is the kind of policy advocacy work we are trying to do to incorporate more renewables into the grid, and also working on to actually finalize some trade. So there is another framework that is going on rounds with the government, and there are multiple stakeholders involved in that CTBCM. So CTBCM is the competitive trade bilateral contract markets, in which it will give more privatization to the energy sector, and it will have more private players into the electricity generation mix. that could lead to cheaper electricity production. Also, it can actually benefit the renewable energy integration in the country as well. So, in that framework, people will be independent to build their own solar energy parks or wind farms, and they will be selling that energy to their individual buyers. Instead, they have don't instead they don't have to sell it to the government as in the current scenario they have to do in most IPP cases. So, considering that, to free ourselves from the burdens of imported fossil fuels and existing debt of energy, we actually need to capitalize on our renewable energy potential that holds a gateway of opportunities in terms of investment, research and development, and uplifting economic vision of the country. So that's me wrapping up.
Yes, thank you so much. Very interesting that, as you said, the actions on power sectors will come first in Pakistan, and for sure, in the power sector side, Pakistan will reach the decarbonization programs and targets. But come forward, like what's the next sector that Pakistan's will focus on, maybe parallel with the ongoing efforts on the power sector, or maybe also after the efforts on power sectors done. Because maybe if I can compare to what happened in Indonesia, it's kind of similar because we are also focusing more on the power sector side. As Mr. Ilham mentioned, JETP also very heavy on the efforts on the power sector side. But we also trying to tap the issues in industrial, in buildings. However, the efforts not as big as the efforts on the power agendas. So how does it like in Pakistan? Is it like similar or like another story?
So in Pakistan, efforts are being done for the power sector mainly, but we do have like few initiatives on decarbonizing the transport sector because we have certainly dealt with a lot of issues regarding the air pollution, the smog issues in Lahore, and all that contributed. All that happened due to the contributions from the transport sector emissions. So that will is on the way, and other than that, we are also trying to decarbonize our agrarian value chains. So there are some initiatives going on to actually capitalize on the carbon offsets and getting more forestry kind of things done under the red plus plus initiatives. So these are the decarbonization efforts, but mainly they will remain focused on the power sector because at times it like around 60 to 70% of the carbon emissions come from the power sector. So as compared to the power sector, all other emissions are lesser, and yeah, so first is the power sector that needs to be decarbonized.
Okay, thank you so much. And I also want to know more about Pakistan, Mrs. Afaf. And as you mentioned earlier, that hydropower is one of the potentials renewable sources in Pakistan. And could you like maybe tell us some story on some projects, maybe on some renewables projects in Pakistan, and maybe how does the renewables projects impacting or like influencing local communities in the area of the projects?
So for the hydropower potential, we have like majorly the big dams, but we have some run of the river dams in up the north, and but major focus is on developing bigger dams as water reservoirs. And for the success stories, that obviously we have access to clean energy, but there is a downside as well, that there are a lot of people that needs to be displaced because of building those dams. Otherwise, we could also have the run of river dams on that, but it's certainly the I feel like there's a risk in policy making that we always take before actually taking the action on certain things. So considering that already the hydropower potentials, we are also using the reservoir dams to there is the planning of developing floating solar farms on the dams, so they could be used in parallel to generate renewable energy as well. Otherwise, when the communities are concerned, there are some smaller dams that are actually energizing very off-grid remote communities which are not connected to the centralized grid, and that's they are actually very interesting projects because they are done by very independent donors. So coming to this actual very relevant story is that there is one dam, it's called Afaf, and somebody built this dam to energize that village uh, when he lost her daughter, whose name was Afaf. So somebody recently came to me with this information that there's a dam that has been built with your name, and I'm like, okay, that's great, but that's more like a philanthropy work people are doing to make their communities more engaged and making sure that they have access to clean energy.
Thank you so much for the story. And we have a very limited time. I would like to know more about Pakistan, India, and Indonesia, but I think we should wrap up the sessions. And I would like to know the concluding remarks from each one of you. And we can start maybe from Mr. Swita. Please, the time is yours.
I think in conclusion, I would just like to state two or three aspects of the entire energy transition, especially in the Indian context, is one, that we understand that there are several stakeholders that are involved in this process, and there are several beneficiaries. At the same time, there are going to be several people who are going to be impacted by the transition. So getting energy transitions is a multi-dimensional problem, and it needs solution where every expertise will certainly be required and needs to be put into action in a way where all of these stakeholders are benefited in the process. If we don't do so, and if we don't do so consciously, then there are going to be repercussions in terms of, stalling of projects, or in terms of, let's say, um, um, not enough public support to the entire process of transitions that may happen. And hence, I feel that the policy and the regulatory space specifically needs to get into action more actively, and they have to be in a mode of providing rapid response to to be able to achieve the targets that have been set in time, and at the same time ensure that the action that is taken is still nimble in a way where um, um, the impact of transition overall on the society is also taken into consideration. And I think one last thing is that hence, probably also something that Ilham was mentioning is that learnings from other countries that we can really get into even all of ours is essentially to come up with new frameworks, new processes, and new methods, which will ensure that we have all of us can go through a smooth energy transition.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Swita. Next, I would like to hear also concluding remarks from Mr. Ilham.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, I think we can be both a bit more nuanced in looking at energy transition efforts, especially for the global South countries. Just recently, IESR released a report which assessed government capacity in planning for a just energy transition, which confirms our ideas that despite the obvious flaws, that there are multiple good qualities that they can bring in planning for a good and just and fair energy transition. Yeah, well, it's just we as a civil society organization, we should consolidate our position and be alive to dynamics, to changes that this, well, our role is to advocate and support the government. So being alive to what the dynamics of the government is crucial for our work. And I wish Afaf and Sweta a good luck for their efforts in their respective countries. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ilham. And last but not least, Mrs. Afif, please share your concluding remarks.
Sure. First of all, thank you for inviting me, and thank you for inviting all other respectable guests. And as Ilham and Shweta said already, that energy transition initiatives should prioritize the social equity and inclusive development by ensuring equitable access to clean energy for all segments of the society. Either it comes under the terms of the employment, and it should make sure that nobody is losing their jobs if they are working in a certain field and it's being ruptured with this renewable energy initiatives, and making sure that they are skilled enough to get into this industry as well. So, but considering that, this also reduces energy poverty and empowers marginalized communities and promotes social cohesion and resilience as well. So, considering Pakistan, we have wide range of benefits, especially we need to get rid of our circular debt at this moment, and energy transition is the one thing that can make it happen. And looking at the economic prosperity and social development as well, and improved lifestyles. So that's me wrapping up. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Afaf. Yeah, so this is like the last questions from our talk for today from Mr. Hari. We would like to know your concluding remark or like your closing remarks about the just energy transitions agenda, especially here in Indonesia, in your province, and also maybe in a global context. If you have any concluding remarks, please, Mr. Hari, share with us.
So just energy transition is must be done for our future or for our kids in the future. Like now in South Sumatra, is the coal mining is a contribute destruction of our like land, and also the river is polluting with the cost of the mining, and also the society is now become poor because they can't work anymore, then the land took by the mining sectors. So that in the future, shifting from so we have to go to renewable energy for our future and our kid. Maybe I can say that. Thank you.
Okay, so we are hopeful for our future like that, Mr. Hari. Thank you so much for your story, your elaborations, and your concluding remarks for today. And I think that's all for today. It's wrapping up all our discussions for today, and I would give my biggest thanks to all the guests here, Miss Afaf, Mrs. Swita, and Mr. Ilham. Thank you so much for your contribution, to your time, to your knowledge and experience that are shared today. It's very valuable informations and discussions, and I hope you guys can work for the better environment and for the better a world also. And that's all for today. Thank you so much for joining and for watching this podcast. I hope we can live for a better tomorrow. Thank you so much. I'm Martha. I'm signing off from this podcast.